Thank you to Hooks and Needles for kindly sponsoring today's video. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another crocheting video. So it's already the end of March and it's pretty much already summer here in the Philippines and it's getting very hot. So today I actually wanted to make like a lacy and flowy type of crochet shirt that's perfect for the summer. So I just want to make something like flowy and light that I can easily put on when we're going out. And of course, I had to search through Pinterest for some inspiration and I found this photo, which is kind of the vibe that I'm going for. So yeah, that's going to be like the basis of my project in today's video. So I actually have this yarn from Loops and Threads. This is their Silky Soft Rind from Bamboo yarn. And it's in this like beautiful icy blue color. And the fiber of the yarn makes it look so silky and shiny, which I really like. So this is the yarn that I'm going to be using for this shirt. And yeah, I'm very excited to see the shirt build up with this yarn because I find it really pretty. I don't really have a super solid game plan, but we're just going to figure it out as we work through the shirt. And we're just going to trust the process as we usually do. I'm really excited to get started on this and I'm very much looking forward to the kind of shirt that we'll have by the end of this video. So for this crochet summer lace shirt, I will be using a 4.5mm crochet hook and I've decided to construct it from the base of the shirt going up. So grabbing my yarn and hook, I'm going to make a slip knot and start with a foundation single crochet. Chain 2, then insert your hook into the back ridge of the first chain and pull up a loop. Yarn over and pull through one loop on your hook. Then yarn over and pull through both loops. This creates your first foundation single crochet. Insert your hook into the bottom of the stitch and pull up a loop. Yarn over, then pull through one loop, then yarn over and pull through both loops. Since I don't want this shirt to be oversized, I'm going to continue making more stitches until I have a length that's only long enough to wrap around my bust without closing completely. I ended up making a total of 165 stitches of my foundation single crochet. If you're going to make this for yourself, you want to make sure to have a multiple of 8 stitches plus 5. So for me, my multiple of 8 was 160 plus 5, which gave me 165 stitches in total. I'm going to turn my work and I'm going to be working my way down the foundation single crochet. The next row that I'll be working on is row 1 of the lace pattern that I decided to do. Now we're always going to start a new row with a stacked single crochet. I'm going to go straight into the first stitch of the row and make a single crochet. Then I'm going to insert my hook into the center of that single crochet and make another single crochet. This stacked single crochet counts as the first double crochet of the row. Then we're going to skip the next stitch, and into the second stitch, I'm going to make a V-stitch. To make a V-stitch, I'm going to make a double crochet, then chain 2, then make another double crochet into the same stitch. And that's our first V-stitch. Skip the next 3 stitches and into the 4th stitch, make another V-stitch. So that's 1 double crochet, chain 2, then another double crochet all in the same stitch. Again, skip the next 3 stitches and make another V-stitch into the 4th stitch. I'm going to continue making V-stitches until I reach the end of my foundation single crochet. After making the very last V-stitch, you should have 2 stitches left. Skip the next stitch and make a double crochet into the last stitch of the row. So this is what row 1 of the pattern should look like. I'm going to turn my work to continue working on row 2 of the pattern. Again, I'm going to start my new row with a stacked single crochet into the first stitch. Now I'm going to make 5 double crochets into this first V-stitch. Nothing special, just 5 double crochets into the chain 2 space of this V-stitch. Then I'm going to go straight into the next V-stitch and make a V-stitch into that. So I'm going to go into the chain 2 space and make a double crochet, chain 2, and another double crochet. Then I'm going to make another cluster of 5 double crochets into the next V-stitch space. So after this set of double crochets, I'm going to make another V-stitch into the next space. I'm just going to continue to alternate between making a cluster of 5 double crochets and then making a V-stitch all the way down the row, keeping in mind that I'm only working into the V-stitch spaces. And just like how we started our row with a cluster of 5 double crochets, we should also end our row with another cluster of 5 double crochets into this last V-stitch space. Then I'm just going to make one last double crochet into the top of that stacked single crochet from the previous row. For row 3, I'm going to turn my work and start my new row with a stacked single crochet into the first stitch. Then from the cluster of 5 double crochets, you want to look for the middle stitch, which is the third double crochet of the cluster. Then I'm going to make a V-stitch into that middle stitch. Again, that's a double crochet, chain 2, and another double crochet into the same stitch. Then I'm going to make another V-stitch into the next V-stitch space. Then into the next cluster, I'm going to make another V-stitch into the middle stitch of that cluster. At first, it could be a bit confusing to spot the middle double crochet, but as you continue to make this pattern, you kind of just get used to it, and then you'll instantly be able to spot that middle stitch in no time. So the rest of this row consists of making V-stitches into the middle of the double crochet clusters and into the chain 2 spaces of the V-stitches from the row below. Once I reach the end of the row, I'm going to make a double crochet on top of the stacked single crochet from the previous row. I'm going to turn my work, and it's pretty much a repeating pattern from here. I'm just going to repeat row 2 and row 3 until I'm happy with the length of my shirt. So this next row is going to be a repeat of row 2 with the alternating clusters of double crochets and V-stitches. Then the following row would be a repeat of row 3 that's just a bunch of V-stitches all the way across. I actually just found this lace pattern on Pinterest, so I don't really know what this stitch is called, so I'll just be referring to it as the lace pattern throughout this video. It's a rather simple pattern, but I really love how airy and flowy the stitch is, especially with this yarn I'm using. Once you've worked up a bit more rows, you can see how the double crochet clusters line up with each other with the V-stitches lining up as well. And of course, there's the row of the V-stitches in between each row to complete the lace pattern. Wait, hold on. Have you been wanting to learn how to crochet but don't exactly know where to start? Well, we've all been there, but I have just a solution for you. This right here is the solution. This is a hooks and needles subscription box that's filled with everything you need to get started. This kit includes high-quality yarn, a crochet hook, darning needles, and even this super cute stork-shaped scissors. This month's box features Woodland Whisper yarn in this beautiful blue and gray colorway. They're also really soft, which makes it so nice to work with. Seeing how there's so many goodies in one box, I'd be pretty excited to crochet too. Their kit also includes a booklet with 3 different patterns for you to choose from. This month, you can either make a sailor's knot headband, a rabbit lovey, or a woven storage basket. The patterns are well written with each pictures for each step, which is perfect for visual learners like myself. If you need further instruction, I love how they included a QR code that leads you to a beginner-friendly video tutorial, making it easy to follow along. Each pattern is suitable for different skill levels, giving their subscribers a good variety to choose from. I also love how there's a crochet glossary at the back of the booklet, which makes it so helpful, especially if you're just starting out or learning how to crochet. It gives you definitions of like what's a back loop, a chain, a double crochet, and other necessary information that you need to start crocheting. Whether you're a beginner or someone who wants to enhance their skills, a Hooks and Needles subscription box is a great choice with everything you need for your first or next crochet project. As summer is just around the corner, there's no better time to start crocheting and finally pick up that hobby you've always wanted to learn. If you want to try out Hooks and Needles for yourself, you can click the link in the description box and use my discount code Angela20 for 20% off your first box. Thank you once again to Hooks and Needles for sponsoring today's video. And now let's go back to working on my crochet shirt. Okay, so I've done this much of my crochet shirt. There's like 10 rows of the lace stitch, and honestly it's looking so good. When I was like choosing between different stitches for this shirt, I was kind of like indecisive on what stitch I wanted, and I ended up going with this one, but I was like still kind of unsure if I liked how it looked. But now that it's like working up a little bit more, I'm really happy with this stitch. But yeah, I've done 10 rows of this stitch, and this is going to be the base of the shirt, and it's going to be folded over like this, so parts of it is the front panels and then a part of it is the back panel, so it's all worked up in one piece, so that like involves less sewing. So that's how I decided to build up this crochet shirt. Yeah, I'm really happy with how it's looking like so far, and the yarn that I'm using makes the shirt very flowy as well. So yeah, I'm really happy about that. But it is like slightly a bit more challenging to work with because this is bamboo yarn, so it's like silky and slippery, and like these strands of yarn tends to like split sometimes when I'm working with it, so that's like the tricky part. But aside from that, I am still really happy with this yarn, and like the sheen in this yarn is like so pretty. I still do need to make a couple more rows because it's still pretty small right now, so I have to build it up a little bit more before I can move on to the next step. Okay, so I have finished this much of my crochet shirt, and this is like 25 rows of the lace stitch that I'm doing, and I had just started the new skein of yarn. And when I hold it up against myself, I think it's like at a good length where I can start separating the front and back panel so that I can like make the sleeve holes. But low-key, I'm kind of overthinking it, like it might be a little too short because I don't want it to be too cropped. But at the same time, I'm kind of thinking like this is a good length, but I don't know, we'll see. But so far, this is where we're at with the crochet shirt. After much thinking, I ended up only adding one more row for the base of my shirt, which gives me a total of 26 rows before I make my sleeve holes. There are probably easier ways on how I could have done this, but here's how I made my calculations to determine where to separate my front and back panels. Since I made my shirt tighter, it can't close all the way in the front, so the easiest way that I thought of was to determine the size of my back panel. So I first took the overall width of my base panel, then subtracted it to my chest width, which is basically the measurement from armpit to armpit taken across the chest. So that's 29 inches minus 15 inches, which gives me 14 inches. This new measurement that I have is now the measurement for my back panel. So going back to the shirt, it's easier to count the double crochet clusters, so I'm just going to count towards the middle of the shirt how many clusters it takes to reach 14 inches for my back panel. So here where I place stitch markers, there are 11 clusters in between, which is equivalent to 14 inches for my back panel. And I also want to make sure that there is the same amount of clusters on each end of the stitch markers, which will be our front panels. For me, I have 5 clusters for each of my front panels. I apologize if this doesn't make a lot of sense, but this is what I ended up doing, and this is what worked for me. I also recommend placing the stitch marker on the V-stitch that's closest to the double crochet cluster when you're marking it, instead of on the cluster itself. But if you ended on a V-stitch row, I recommend placing your stitch marker into the V-stitch that's in line with the other V-stitches and not the one that's on top of a cluster. So going back to my working yarn, I'm just going to continue the lace pattern, and since my last row was the row with double crochet clusters, my next row is just V-stitches all the way across. Once I reached my stitch marker, I'm just going to add one double crochet into that marked V-stitch, then I'm going to turn my work. From here, I just continued working the lace pattern back and forth to form my first front panel. I ended up adding 17 rows to my front panel, also making sure that the length is long enough for my sleeve hole. I just added one last row of single crochets across the last row before cutting off my yarn. I just placed one single crochet into each double crochet and placed 2 single crochets into each of the chain 2 spaces of each V-stitch. I also found it easier to add single crochets to the V-stitch row, so I recommend ending on a V-stitch row as well. Adding that last row of single crochets just makes the edge a bit cleaner and neat. Now that I've finished my first front panel, I'm going to go to the other end of my shirt and work on the second front panel. I attached my yarn by making a double crochet into the V-stitch where I placed my second stitch marker, then I worked my pattern across the row as per usual. Once I reached the end of the row, I made a double crochet into the last stitch and turned my work. Just like the first front panel, I just continued to work the lace pattern back and forth until I reached the same number of rows, which is 17 rows for me. Once I had 17 rows, I added a row of single crochets as well before fastening off. Now that both of my front panels were done, it was time to make the back panel. I attached my yarn into the V-stitch with my first stitch marker and made a double crochet. Then I worked the lace pattern across until I reached my second stitch marker. Once I reached my second stitch marker, I placed a double crochet into that marked V-stitch and turned my work. And again, I just worked the lace pattern back and forth until I reached the same number of rows as my front panels. Alright, so I've just finished making the extension of the front and back panels to accommodate the sleeve holes. And before I sewed in the shoulder seams, I used stitch markers to connect them temporarily so that I can try it on and see if everything fits nicely. And I'm glad I did that because I don't really like how it fits towards the neck area, because as you can see, the gap for the neck is actually very small between the two panels. So I wasn't really happy about that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a few decreases towards the neck area just so that the neckline's a bit wider, and hopefully that's going to solve my problem. It's just too bad because I wanted to keep the edges of the front panels just straight so that it would be much easier for me. But then the distance for the neck area turned out to be too small. And it's not like I can make the back panel any wider because, they're all made in one piece. So the easiest thing I could do is just to make decreases at the neckline to accommodate my neck. I went ahead and unraveled the upper portion of my front panels and figured out how to make decreases with this pattern. It did take me a couple of trial and errors until I was finally happy with the way the decreases turned out. So I have unraveled my front panel up until where I want to start my decreases, and when my front panel is folded over, you can see that this is the edge. So this is also the side where I'm going to be making my decreases. Make sure that you're not making your decreases on this edge because this is where your sleeve hole is going to be, so make sure that it's on the edge where the neckline is going to be. So I'm going to be making my first decrease on the next row, and my next row is just a bunch of V-stitches without the clusters. So essentially the idea of the decreases is you're going to be removing one cluster at a time. So for the first decrease I'm going to do is I'm essentially going to be decreasing this cluster. So I'm going to turn my work. So I'm still working on this edge where the decreases is going to be. So I'm going to make my stacked single crochet as usual. So we're essentially going to be combining this cluster and this V-stitch to make a decrease. So going into that middle stitch of this cluster, I'm going to make an unfinished double crochet. And then I'm going to go into the next V-stitch and make an unfinished double crochet again. And with 3 loops on my hook, I'm going to yarn over, pull through all 3. And then I'm going to finish this V-stitch right here, so chain 2. And then I'm going to make a double crochet into that V-stitch. So by doing that, we combine these two together to make our decrease. And then I'm just going to work through the rest of the row like normal. So I've worked my way across the row. So I'm going to turn my work and continue to make the lace stitch pattern. So my next row is going to be the row with the double crochet clusters and V-stitches. Okay, so I've made it to the end where I decreased in the previous row. So as you can see, unlike the rest of the rows where I ended with a double crochet cluster, I can't do that anymore in this row because of the decrease that I made. So I will be ending on a V-stitch. So I'm going to end this row with a double crochet as usual on top of that stacked single crochet. And there you go. So I decided to decrease every third row. So this is the first decrease that I made, and I'm currently on my third row after making that first decrease. So it's time to make another decrease. So this is actually a row that has double crochet clusters. So I'm supposed to put another double crochet cluster in this next V-stitch. So I'm just going to do that. So to make a decrease, I'm essentially going to be combining these two V-stitches together. So on my very last double crochet of this cluster, I'm going to make an unfinished double crochet. And then I'm going to go into that very last V-stitch and I'm going to make an unfinished double crochet as well. Now with 3 loops on my hook, I'm going to yarn over and pull through all 3. And to end this row, I'm just going to make a double crochet into that very last stitch on top of that stacked single crochet. So earlier I made a decrease for the row that's just a bunch of V-stitches, and now I made a decrease for the row with double crochet clusters. So after that, I'm just going to work the rest of my rows as I usually would. So working on the next row, I made my stacked single crochet, and then I'm going to jump right into that first double crochet cluster. I'm going to make a V-stitch into that middle stitch, and then I'm going to continue the lace stitch throughout the rest of the row. So I have finished making my decreases, and I ended up making 3 decreases every third row for the neckline. So I did try to attach the shoulder seams with stitch markers and try it on the shirt so far. And I'm liking it much better now that the neckline is wider. So yeah, I'm really happy about that, and I think it turned out pretty well. So now that that's looking good, I'm going to attach the shoulder seams and then I'm going to work on the sleeves. I think the neckline looks really good with the decreases, and I'm really happy with the way it turned out, and I'm very relieved that they worked just fine with this lace pattern. Once the neckline problem was resolved, I attached my shoulder seams by sewing them together with my darning needle. It made things easier for me since there was that last row of single crochets on the edge, so I just had to sew each stitch to their corresponding stitch. I look so bad right now, but it's just been so hot recently that putting my hair down is just not an option. So the ponytail will have to do for today. So I'm just going to try to ignore the fact that I look like a boiled egg. But anyways, I finished quite a big chunk of the shirt. So here is what I have so far. So I essentially have a vest right now. I didn't show it anymore, but I actually repeated the entire shirt because the first one that I made was actually too small. So I redid the entire thing to make it a little bit bigger. So I'm much happier with the fit now. But all the details that I'll share in the final video will be the details that I ended up using for the latest version of the shirt. So I've already made the whole body portion of the shirt. It's all in one piece, and I've already sewn in the shoulder seams right here. So yeah, the next step now is for me to make the sleeves that I have yet to figure out how to do. As I work on my first sleeve, I just wanted to jump in here and rave about the new Hunger Games book, Sunrise on the Reaping. If you've watched my previous videos, you've probably already heard about how much I love the Hunger Games series, and I was so excited to have read the new prequel. I read it while making this crochet shirt, and girl, the book broke me. No spoilers, but if you think it couldn't get any worse, this book just proves you wrong, and yes, it could get so much worse than you could imagine. The book was such a roller coaster, and it kind of felt crazy to have read it, but yeah, I loved it even though it hurt and destroyed me. They are coming out with a movie adaptation of Sunrise on the Reaping next year, and the casting already looks so good, so I'm very, very excited for the movie. Anyway, sorry about that quick little tangent. So going back to the shirt, I don't know if you noticed, but I unraveled my sleeve and I'm redoing it since my first attempt felt a bit tight around my arm, so I redid it to be a bit more loose this time. Once I was happy with the fit of my sleeve, I played around with different styles of borders for the edge until I settled on this one. I also just found this stitch on Pinterest, so I don't know what the stitch is called, but for some reason, the stitch reminds me of pebbles, so I'll just refer to it as the pebble stitch in this video. So here I finished my first sleeve, so I'm going to work on my second sleeve now. So I've marked 2 areas where I want to add increases since I found that not adding the increases made my sleeve a little too tight. So to make my sleeve a little larger, I decided to add 2 increases, one on the front panel and one on the back panel. So here's where we separated the back panel from the front panel to make the sleeve hole. And I'm going to attach my yarn into this first double crochet of the back panel. And I'm just going to make a V-stitch into that double crochet. So that's a double crochet, chain 2, and another double crochet. So for this first row of these sleeves, I found that it works really well that we're just going to be working into the rows of V-stitches. So this is the row with double crochet clusters, and these are the rows with just V-stitches. So we're only going to be working into those V-stitch rows. So we're turning our work sideways. And as you can see, this is where we made our first V-stitch. And this is the row with a double crochet cluster. So we're going to skip over that. And we're going to go into this next double crochet here. That's from the V-stitch row. And we're going to make a V-stitch into that. Then we're going to skip this next row with the double crochet cluster, and we're going to move into this next double crochet right here from that V-stitch row again. We're going to skip this cluster, and we're going to go into that next double crochet and make another V-stitch. So this first round of the sleeves is just V-stitches all the way around. Now, if your sleeve already fits well, you don't have to make increases. But for me, I wanted my sleeve to be a little bit looser, so I'm going to add an increase. So instead of skipping this next cluster right here and moving on to the V-stitch row with this double crochet, I'm going to work a V-stitch into this row with the double crochet cluster. So I'm going to take out my stitch marker, and I'm going to make a V-stitch into this row right here, which serves as an increase. And after making that increase, I'm just going to continue to make V-stitches into the rows of the V-stitches from the back panel. Once you reach the shoulder seam, you're just going to skip that and continue to work into the double crochets of those V-stitch rows. Remember to skip over those rows with double crochet clusters unless you're making an increase. To match the first increase I made on the back panel, I'm going to make another increase into this next row that's on the front panel. So since I'm making an increase, I'm going to make a V-stitch into this row of double crochet clusters. And after making that increase, I'm going to go back into working only into those V-stitch rows. Alright, so here I've made it to the end of the round, and I'm back to where we attached our yarn to start the sleeve. Now you want to count how many V-stitches you made for that first round of your sleeve, and you want to make sure that you have an even number of V-stitches. I have a total of 20 V-stitches around my sleeve, so that works perfectly for me. So once you made sure that you have an even number of V-stitches, you want to slip stitch into that very first double crochet that we made, where we attached our yarn to start the sleeve. After slip stitching into that double crochet, you want to slip stitch into that chain 2 space of that V-stitch. Since the first row of our sleeves was just a bunch of V-stitches, we're going to continue our lace pattern. So the next row would be making the double crochet clusters and V-stitches. So we're going to start our round with a double crochet cluster. So after slip stitching into that chain 2 space, you're going to chain 3, and this counts as your first double crochet. And then you're going to make 4 more double crochets into that chain space to make our double crochet cluster. So after making our first double crochet cluster, we're going to move into the next V-stitch and make a V-stitch into that, following the lace pattern that we've been doing for the full shirt. Now we're just going to follow the alternating pattern of the double crochet cluster, then V-stitch, double crochet cluster, V-stitch, all the way around until we reach our first double crochet cluster. So since we had an even amount of V-stitches for the first row, our next row should start with a double crochet cluster and end with a V-stitch. So once you've reached the start of the round, you want to slip stitch into the top of that first chain 3 of that cluster. And now we're going to work the next round of our sleeves, which is another round of V-stitches. So after slip stitching into the top of that chain 3, you're going to make another slip stitch into the next stitch. And then we're going to make another slip stitch into that next stitch, which brings us to the middle stitch of our double crochet cluster. So now we're in the middle stitch of that cluster. We're going to make a V-stitch. We're going to start with a chain 5. So this counts as your double crochet and chain 2 of that V-stitch. And then you're going to make a double crochet into that same stitch that we worked into. So here's our first V-stitch of the new round. And then we're going to continue making V-stitches all the way around. So once you get to that double crochet cluster, you want to make a V-stitch into that middle stitch. And then make a V-stitch into the V-stitch from the previous round. So here I've reached the start of my round, and again I'm going to make a slip stitch into the top of that chain 3 that counts as our double crochet. So just like round 2 of the sleeve, the next round is a round with double crochet clusters and V-stitches. So again, we're going to start with another cluster of double crochets. So we're going to make a slip stitch into that chain 2 space and start with a chain 3, which counts as our first double crochet. Then we're going to make 4 more double crochets into that same V-stitch space. After making that first double crochet cluster, we're just going to follow the pattern and make a V-stitch into the next V-stitch space, then another double crochet cluster, and so on. Alright, so from here on out, I'm just going to continue making more rounds following the patterns of rounds 2 and 3 until my sleeve is as long as I want it to be. You just want to remember we're still following the lace pattern that we've been doing, so you have to make sure that the double crochet clusters still align with each other. So after making 11 rounds of the lace stitch, my sleeve is as long as I want it to be. So now we're going to add the border of the sleeves, and I found it easier to end on an odd number of rounds. So that should be the round that's just a bunch of V-stitches. So now we're going to add the border of the sleeves. So going back to our working yarn, I'm just going to make 1 round of single crochets. So chain 1. So I'm going to add a single crochet into that same chain where we made our slip stitch. So normally we're going to add 2 single crochets into this chain 2 space, but I found that if I were to do that in each of my V-stitches, the edge of my sleeve would like flare out, and I don't really like that. So instead, I'm going to go into this chain 2 space and just make 1 single crochet into that. And then I'm going to move into this double crochet and then make 1 single crochet into that. Then make another single crochet into the next double crochet. So in this previous V-stitch, I only made 1 single crochet into the chain 2 space. But in this next V-stitch, I'm going to make 2 single crochets into that chain 2 space. Then into each of the double crochets, I'm going to make 1 single crochets into them. Then again, I'm only going to add 1 single crochet into this chain 2 space. then making 1 single crochet into those double crochets. And then into this next V-stitch, I'm going to make 2 single crochets into that chain 2 space. So I'm just going to be alternating between 1 single crochet into this V-stitch, and then 2 single crochets, and then 1 single crochet, and then 2 single crochets. Alternating between 1 single crochet and 2 single crochets just ensures that the edge of my sleeve won't be flaring out too much. But in between the chain 2 spaces, there are still these double crochets, and I still will be working 1 single crochet into each of those double crochet stitches. So alternating the number of stitches that I put in the V-stitches was just a personal preference of mine, but you could do 2 single crochets in each chain 2 space, or like 1 single crochet, or you could do what I did and alternate it as well, but feel free to do whatever works for you. Once I get to the end of the round, I'm just going to slip stitch into that very first single crochet. Then I'm going to chain 1, then turn my work. Then I'm just going to work 1 single crochet into each stitch all the way around. Now that I'm at the end of my round, I'm just going to slip stitch into the very first stitch of the round. Going to chain 1 and turn my work. So there we have made 2 rounds of single crochets, and the next round that I'll be doing is the last round, and then we'll be done with our sleeve. So after chaining 1 and turning our work, I'm going to go into this next stitch and pull up a loop. Then I'm going to go into this next stitch and pull up another loop. Then I'm going to yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. So this stitch that we made is a single crochet 2 together. Then I'm going to chain 1. So you can kind of see 3 of these vertical bars. And when you pull the stitch, you can kind of see this little gap. And I'm just going to insert my hook into that gap. Then I'm going to pull up a loop. Then with 3 loops on my hook, I'm going to yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. Then I'm going to make another single crochet 2 together in the next 2 stitches. I'm going to insert my hook into the next stitch and pull up a loop. Go into the next stitch and pull up another loop. Then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. Going to chain 1. Then if you kind of pull these 2 stitches apart, you can kind of see that there's this like strand of yarn underneath right here. So I'm going to yarn over. Then I'm going to insert my hook into this space after that strand of yarn. I'm going to pull up a loop. And with 3 loops on my hook, I'm going to yarn over and pull through all 3. So going into the space after that strand of yarn just ensures that there's no yarn that's peeking through between those stitches. So again, I'm going to make a single crochet 2 together to go into the next stitch and pull up a loop. And go into the next stitch and pull up another loop. Then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops to create our single crochet 2 together. Then chain 1. I'm going to yarn over. I'm going to insert my hook into this space, catching that strand of yarn in between the stitches. I'm going to pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. So I'm going to continue making this stitch all the way around. Once I made my last pebble stitch, I'm just going to slip stitch into the chain 1 where we started the round. Then I'm going to chain 1 and cut off my yarn to fasten off. And this is what my finished sleeve looks like. Now that I've finished both of my sleeves, all that I need to do left is the border around the neckline of my shirt, and I decided to do the same kind of border as my sleeves. I started on the bottom edge of my shirt and made a single crochet into each stitch. Once I made my way across and reached the opening of my shirt, I just made 2 single crochets into each double crochet post from each row. I worked my way along the opening and neckline of my shirt until I reached the stitch where I first attached my yarn. Then I slip stitched into that first single crochet of the round. So after making one round of single crochets, the bottom edge of my shirt technically already has 2 rows of single crochets since I started my shirt with a foundation single crochet. And to complete my border, I need to make 2 rounds of single crochets, and since the bottom edge already has 2 rows, I'm going to turn my work, and now I'll only work on the opening and neckline area of my shirt to complete the 2 rows. After making my second row of single crochets, the edge around my shirt looks like this. I turned my work and made sure that I'm working on the right side of my shirt, then I'm going to finish my border with the pebble stitch just like my sleeves. Once I reached the corner of my shirt, I first made the pebble stitch as usual. Then I'm going to yarn over and insert my hook into that same gap and pull up a loop. Then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. I'm going to repeat that one more time into the same gap. Doing this creates a curve around the corner and makes sure that the stitches will lay flat. After that, I just continued working into the rest of the stitches like normal. I just worked the pebble stitch around the edge of my shirt, and since I ended on another corner, I did the same technique as earlier. Then I just slip stitched into the first stitch of the round and fastened off my yarn. I just had to weave in my loose ends, and my crochet lace shirt is finally complete. So here is what the finished crochet summer lace shirt looks like, and I am so happy with how it turned out. I absolutely love everything about it, like the color, the stitch, the sheen of the yarn. Oh, it's so good. And I don't know, I'm like obsessed with the way everything came together, and I can't believe I made this because it's that good. And yeah, I'm really proud of myself for being able to make this. And I think the stitch that I used makes the shirt look intricate yet casual at the same time, which I really like. And I love how like flowy and airy it is. I think I definitely was able to achieve that summer shirt vibe that I wanted at the start of the video. And it's definitely something that's nicer to wear, especially now that it's getting so hot. Hopefully the tutorial that I added in this video is also going to be helpful for anyone who wants to make this shirt as well. With that being said, I think that's all for today's video. I'm really proud with how this shirt turned out, and hopefully I'll be able to get a lot of good use out of it this summer. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content in the future. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you guys in my next one. Bye guys!